All right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. I told the first couple of folks who logged in that we're going to record this workshop and try to add it to the police YouTube. So if you want to go back and watch it later, you can. For anyone who is not in attendance, they also can go back and watch it. I don't want that to stop you from asking questions or whatever. I just want to let people know that it's going to be recorded for keeping background noise to a minimum, that kind of thing. But if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. There's a raise hand button, or feel free to just blurt them out. But I just want to let everyone know beforehand that we're going to record it. So if you have questions and you put them in the chat, Gabe and Anna are going to be monitoring that stuff. And so if I don't see it while I'm giving the presentation and it's, information I want everyone to hear, I'll probably read it back, even if they answer you via text, and then we'll give the answer to everyone in the meeting. So just FYI. Right now, we just have the presentation up on the screen just to show that we're doing the Neighborhood Block Watch Grant Program application process workshop. I recognize most of the names here in the workshop, so I'm sure most of you are already signed up. But we'll go through the presentation from the very beginning, as if everyone here is new. Just FYI. Let me first go to Google, and the reason I always go to Google first is we want to show you where to find the information. You all made it to the workshop, but you may have gotten it from the email that we sent out. You may not have gotten it from the website. And for those who are here who may be new, we always want to show you the easiest way to get to our website. So what I would recommend doing is going to whatever search engine you use. I just pulled Google up because it's the most well-known in the world, obviously, and just type NBW grants into your search engine. And our website should be one of the first options that pops up. So this first option here on my search results is the actual portal website where you're going to submit your application. Can everybody hear me, by the way? I guess I should have asked before we started.
Sounds good, George. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so this is the portal website. This is the website where you're actually going to go. Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate it. Or I don't know, that might be Dion, but I appreciate you. I saw your chat. This is the website you're going to go to actually begin the application. The NBW grant portal is here. This website, the next link down is the link to our main web page, and I like to highlight both of them because I think both are very important. And this is where you would find the updated information each grant year for the application process. So I already have the portal pulled up on my other tab here, so I'm just going to go pull it up from there. But when you do your Google search, what I would say is just go to the portal website, which looks like this. And like I said, most of you have probably already seen it. Like I said, I recognize the names who are here today. But once you get to this website, I would recommend you just bookmark the website or make it a favorite so you don't have to do a Google search every time you want to come back to the website. Depending on what browser you're on, you can search, for how to do a bookmark or how to do a favorite. On the browser here, there's just a little star in the corner of your URL, and you can click that star and add it to your favorites. But this is the website where you would start the application process. It may look a little bit different on your end because this picture actually loads on websites that are outside the city of Phoenix. For some reason, we can't get that picture to load on our website when we're here internally. Not a big deal because our staff is not using the external site anyways, but just to let you guys know. So when you get to this website, there are a couple different things you can do. So you can click the welcome letter. That'll just kind of welcome you to the program. We're doing a little bit of the talking about what we're talking about right now. You can expand these blue headers here. The second blue header will take you to our main web page. And the third blue header is the application guide for the 2026 grant year. So we want to make sure you're aware of those things. You can also, and by the way, this is the screen that we're showing right now. I'm doing it on an incognito browser, a private browser window, because on the other browser, I'm already logged in, which I'll show you in a second. But if you go to, the browser for the first time, I want you to see what it looks like where the register button and the login button are viewable, because when I'm logged in, you won't see that. So when you first come to the website, this is what it'll look like. You can go to common documents and help for our help documents. So common documents I always show first just because it's higher up in the, on the page here in the left-hand menu. But really all that's in common documents is the Exhibit D form. And the Exhibit D form, we go into a lot more detail in the contract signing workshop, and you'll find out more information about that later. But I just want to give you a quick overview. The Exhibit D form is when you purchase tangible equipment or supplies with Blockwatch funds, and they are over $100. The city still technically owns those items, so you're either required to retain the items for 2 more years or return them to the city. That Exhibit D form basically works as a contract extension where you can continue to use the items that you're buying with Blockwatch funds after the grant period ends. So again, high level overview. We're not going to go into it in detail. We do that in the contract signing workshop. Next one, the help menu. Oh, I don't know why it's displaying like that. Of course, it would give me trouble here, wouldn't it? Okay, there we go. For some reason, it didn't display correctly at first. Now it's displaying correctly. And our documents that you will find on our main webpage are also linked here. So you can find the FAQ for this grant year, the HOA 501c3 checklist for this grant year, a general help application checklist. It's not required to be submitted, but it basically has check boxes as you go through the application to, you know, you did this, you did the next step, you did the next step. So it's kind of just like a little help guide. The application guide, I already showed you a main link here on our, you know, landing page for the application guide, but we want to make sure we have it in the help section as well. Again, for some reason, it doesn't like loading from there. So the application guide is there. The step-by-step process is basically a mirror of this PowerPoint. So that process is going to be a PDF version of the PowerPoint that I'll show tonight or this afternoon. And if you want to click through it to help you get through the application, you can. Again, as I mentioned, we're hoping that this recording we're doing now can be put up on YouTube and somebody can just go watch that, and it kind of would replace that PDF document. But the good thing about the PDF is you can click through it at your own speed. You know, and you can go through it to different pages. You don't necessarily have to go through it in order. Like if you've already registered and you just want to remember how to upload a document, you just would go into the PDF to find the document upload section. So that's why I like that as a resource. Let's see here. We'll minimize that. Definition of common terms. Again, I'm going to show all these documents later. Right now, I'm just showing you where to find them. I already have them all open, so I will show them to you. Definition of common terms is just things you may hear around the city of Phoenix if you're going to meetings or looking at some of our documentation or talking to other block watchers, you know, acronyms, that kind of thing. So you'll see that kind of stuff there. And then the rest of this stuff really is for, I guess number 9 is relevant. 7 and 8 are more for the quarterly report process for after you get funded. And again, in the contract signing workshop, we go into all that stuff. That's what the workshop that you would go to once you find out that you're going to be funded. But this last one, I didn't open this one, so I'll open it right now. 2 open documents from this section. You're going to click to make sure the document is green, the row. If you don't click the row green, like let's say we go back to the help section. You go back to the help section, you notice none of these are green. If you click download, you're just going to get that error right there. And essentially, you're not telling the system what you want to open. So what you want to do is click on the document you want to open, and it should open it in a new tab on your browser, just like that. The reason why this document is important is this document is the document that the people who built the website for us wrote for you guys. So if you want to use this version of the document, you can. It's a little bit more technical jargon, I'll say, for lack of a better term. The document that we use for the application process, you can see it has pictures in every document showing you arrows and squares and where to click. And then just down at the bottom, we have a little bit of text description, whereas that other document will have a little bit more, you know, higher level understanding of computers, that kind of thing. Sorry, here it is. So a little bit higher level of understanding of computers for this document. You're not going to see as many pictures. You're going to see more, you know, jargon in there, computer jargon, technical jargon, but it will lead you through the application if you want to use that document. We just make them both available to the public, to applicants for help. So you're to this website, you found this website, you're ready to register. What you're going to do, you're going to click this register button right here on the top right, not the very top right. If you already have an account, you can click the login, and we'll go to that in a second. But you're going to click the register button right there. You'll notice that it pulls up this page. The first thing I want to point out is this button right here, this first drop down, it defaults to applicant. You want to leave it as applicant. And if you only have to do this registration one time, so if you've already done it, you can ignore this part. But we want to make sure it's part of the presentation. So you're going to leave that as default to applicant. The reviewers and both are really for the oversight committee, the folks scoring the applications. So you want to just leave it as applicant. You enter your information down here. You enter your username that you want to create and your password that you create. You click I agree to the terms. And the one thing you'll notice is the register button or submit button is not viewable here on the page. We apologize. We don't know at what point this happened, but the coding of the page somehow changed. And what you have to do to get the button to appear is you have to zoom out on your screen resolution until that blue register button appears down there. The good thing is you only have to do this one time. You're going to register once. You don't ever need to change your screen resolution ever again, because you'll automatically either be logged in via the autofill feature of your browser if you do that, or just by remembering your password. You don't ever need to come here and register again. To do the zoom in, zoom out function, if you're on a PC, you're going to use the control and minus button to make the screen smaller. And then once you click that register button, you're going to use the control and plus button to get back to your normal resolution. If you're on a Mac computer, you're going to hold the command button down and do the same thing. So command and minus key, and the minus key, by the way, is the key just to the right of the 0 on the top row of your keyboard. That's the minus, and then the plus key is the key just to the right of that. You can use the plus and minus key on the alphanumeric side of your keyboard if you have that. That's the very far right. I think the keyboard on Mac computers, Apple computers, don't have an alphanumeric keyboard unless you buy a specific type. So you just would use the minus and plus keys next to the 0 button, the 0 key. But that's how you register. So make sure you follow these rules here, because the password does have to be a specific thing. It has to be at least 8 characters long and contain one of each of the following things. So if you haven't registered yet, make sure you follow that. By the way, if you do, just like, say, for example, you're not going to apply for an application this year, I always recommend registering on this system, because this is how we stay in contact with folks. This is really like our list serve. This is the list that we sent that first reminder out from, was anyone who's registered on our system. So that first email letting you know that the 2026 application process was going to open on November 1 was done from this listserv. And you do need a registration on this website in order to begin an application or be a signer on an application if you're not going to be the contact person, and you would be signing quarterly reports in that instance, and we'll get into all that stuff later. But the only other thing I want to point out here in the address field, if you live in an apartment complex or condo complex, don't use the number symbol like that. The system doesn't like those truncated characters for the address field. So if you do live in an apartment, let's say you're at 1234 Main Street, and let's say you use the word unit instead. So do unit, or you can abbreviate apartment, or you can do suite, whatever you want. Just don't do that right there, because the system will give you an error and it will not let you save. All right. So that is the portal website where you go to submit your application. I'm going to go away from the portal site just for a second, and then we'll come back to it, because that's the site where we're going to do most of the information on the grant. But I just want to show you that first, the registration process. To get to our other website, you're going to click the middle blue drop down, and you're going to go to this website. This is the main website for our grant program. So some of you may have already seen this. I think we linked it in the email. But it has all the same pertinent information. So the portal you can link back to, the application guide. We soon will be updating the Spanish application guide. I think it's supposed to be done here in a couple days, and we will post it on the website. It is not posted as of yet. So if you have anyone who's Spanish speaking who has any questions, have them contact us, and we can walk through with them on the Spanish guide. The directions for completing your application are there. The checklist, basically all the documents I showed in the help section on that other website are also here. There are also some other documents, the HOA 501c3 checklist, the FAQ, the Exhibit D form you don't need until, again, you're funded and the grant year is going to end. And then some of these forms down here, I believe the PMP and the Blockwatch Sign folks are working on getting new forms created, but as of now, these forms are the most recent form. If the link is broken or the form doesn't pull up, let us know. We will let you know if there's something wrong with the form or if something is sold out, whatever the case may be. The officer who runs the PMP program recently retired, but he is currently training his replacement, so that's good. And he's staying on also as a volunteer. So that'll be good for us for getting that kind of information. But this is our main website. You're not going to do anything in relation to completing the application on this site. You'll notice it says the application can be found on the portal website, which is the one we're on. But this is probably the most important website for information purposes. Anything involving the grant, whether there's been changes to the grant. By the way, there were no changes for this year. It's the same application as last year. But in years where there are changes, you will see them listed here, a link or a link to a guide or something. This is the most important website. So again, I would bookmark it if I were you, just to be safe, and you can come back to this later. Typically, it's updated about mid-October. So for say you submit this application, you're ready to do the 2027 application next November, you're going to come back to this website about mid-October, and it should be updated for the 2027 process. One thing I did not mention yet, the application due date, Thursday, December 4th at 4 p.m. Arizona time. So I'm going to show you one thing real quick back in the portal. Let's go back to the portal real quick. Might be this one. Yes. Okay. So I'm logged in. If you click programs here, you'll notice that this submission deadline says 6 p.m. The reason that says 6 p.m. is because the company that built this website for us is on the East Coast. So their time zone is Eastern Standard Time. So that 6 p.m. is really Eastern Standard Time. But if you refer to our website here, it says 4 p.m. So I want everyone to remember 4 p.m., 4 p.m., 4 p.m. That is the deadline. The portal website will not accept your submission after 4 p.m. Arizona time on December 4th. Just so you know, if you have questions, I say this in every workshop we do, if you have questions, please don't wait till 3:59 p.m. on submission day. Our staff obviously will be here that entire day to make sure we're here to answer questions, but get those questions to us as early as possible. That's really our busiest day of the year. If you want to call at 3:49, that's perfectly fine. I just say don't call at 3:59 and say I haven't started my application yet, because you're not going to have enough time to finish it. Just, keep that in mind. And myself, I'm a procrastinator, so I know how it is. I don't want to sound like I'm preaching or anything like that, but we get phone calls at 3:59, 4 o'clock, 4:01, 4:02 from people just starting applications. It happens every year. And so that's why I give a heads up not to do that if possible. Okay, so all these documents right here, I'm not going to click to open them from here. I already have them open, so I'm just going to pull them up, but I'm going to go through every document real quick and just briefly talk about that. And then when we get to the guide, we're actually going to do somewhat of the presentation of the guide, just giving you the basics of the program before we get into how you use the website. Because I think the information in the guide is more important than the website itself, but you'll see that in a bit. But for now, this is the FAQ link. So the FAQ looks like this. It'll have, pretty much all the information you would need to fill out the grant, whether it be eligibility criteria, how much money you can apply for, links to various things. That's what our FAQ is really for. Is every question we've ever gotten in this document? No, of course not, because it would be 50 pages long or something, but I think it's a pretty good sample of what people typically ask. So it's a good document to reference, if you have questions and you're unsure of the answer, and you certainly can call our staff whenever. I'll actually put my number here in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And you can certainly call or email me about the grant program. Okay, so that's FAQ. The next one is the definition of common terms. Like I said, you'll see some acronyms in here. You may also see some things that exactly what they are from the past, It's just basically a general sample of terms you may hear out in your neighborhood at Blockwatch meetings or Phoenix Blockwatch Advisory Board meetings or any of that kind of stuff. The next thing, scoring criteria. This is very important. This is the criteria the Oversight Committee is going to score you on. So crime prevention, safety, quality of life factors is 50% of your score. Budget evaluation is 20%. Community involvement is 20%. And viability or feasibility to complete the project is 10%. And so what these things really mean is crime prevention, the top one is, what is your program or what is your project that you're applying for going to do to affect crime prevention? Can you tie the items you're putting in your budget to reducing crime? Can you tie your narrative to reducing crime? That kind of stuff. So that's 50% of your weighted score. Budget evaluation, you're just basically being evaluated on how good of a budget you wrote. The one example I always use, and I will get into it later, the type of items that are not allowed. But if you don't see it on that list, you really can apply for anything. And we do have some people who are very creative. But if you put like a unicorn or something on there, obviously not a very good job in the budget, and you'll probably be scored down for something like that. So what I always tell folks is make sure the items that you request in the budget can be tied to crime prevention. And then when you ask for an item, if you were an oversight committee scoring that application, what would you think about what you're reading? Because the people scoring your applications really are your peers. They're other Blockwatch people who live in the city of Phoenix and have been appointed by their council people. And so the council people trust them to score those applications based on what they've learned about Blockwatch. So if you think it would look bad, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, maybe don't put it in your budget, that kind of thing. Community involvement, what the Oversight Committee and City Council are looking for there is how active not only the signers of the grant are, but also the other people in your neighborhood who you work with. So we've had instances in the past, and this is kind of how this scoring criteria evolved. We've had instances in the past where someone would apply for $15,000, or I guess it would back then it would have been $10,000, but they apply for $10,000 for like lighting, for example. And then in their grant application, they don't write anything about what the group is doing from a volunteer perspective. So it's great. The lighting is great. Obviously, the city wants alleys, brighter, so there's no crime, no blight, that kind of thing. It's not that the city is against dark alleys or whatever the case may be. The city is obviously in favor of having areas lit up. But the concern would be just you applying for money to turn lights on and then not doing any community involvement at all for the neighborhood. So that's really where that came from. Basically any service you're doing for your neighborhood in terms of I get this question a lot. Is it directly tied to this grant project? And I normally would tell you yes, that you want to project the hours that your entire group is going to do for volunteer hours going forward for the project, but you're going to base that on, your previous year. If you think you're going to do a bigger project than you did last year because you have more funding, you absolutely can put that into your grant. If you're doing things that are related to Blockwatch, but maybe not directly related to your project here, you can absolutely put that in your volunteer hours. Community involvement can also be any in-kind donation that your neighborhood, if you have your own neighborhood fund, is going to donate to the project. So the best example is, say you're applying for $15,000 and your neighborhood's going to put its own $15,000 in as a matching fund to do a project. You absolutely can include that in that section saying, not only are we volunteering this many hours, but we're doing matching funds for our project as well. We're hoping to get $15,000 from the city, and we are going to put our own $15,000 in. You also, in the community involvement section, you can put any donations you receive. A lot of groups receive donations from, Walmart, grocery stores, that kind of thing, food and drink for their meetings, water for their cleanups when it's hot outside. Any of that you can include in that section. That will all be a part of community involvement. Any volunteerism you're doing to collect funds, clean up your neighborhood, do patrols, any of that kind of stuff. And then the last one, the 10%, the project viability or feasibility. The best example for that is, if you write in your grant that you're going to completely eliminate crime 100%, probably an unreasonable goal. More power to you if that's what you want to do. But just keep in mind, there is a section on the application where you're being scored based on how realistic your project is. So keep that in mind. So that's the scoring criteria. The other part of the scoring criteria here is the oversight committee has actually given definitions or descriptions of what a high score, mid score, and low score would be in these sections. And there's one page for each one. So the first page, you'll see crime prevention there and a description for how you score highly. The next page, you'll see budget evaluation with the same information. The next one, you'll see community involvement. And then the last one, you'll see project viability. And then one of the oversight committees has asked me to mention this, or one of the oversight committee members, excuse me, has asked me to mention this because they do score, like for last year, for example, there were 172 applications. So they do score quite a few applications. So they're just asking that you be succinct in your narrative descriptions. You're not required to do a certain number of words, a certain number of characters. You're not required to, make it look like a dissertation or anything like that, but you want to be very specific about what you're going to do and then provide detail. If it takes you a lot of, many paragraphs to do that, that's perfectly fine. It's up to you. If you can do that in 1 or 2 paragraphs, I'm sure the oversight committee would appreciate, being able to be succinct in that section. So they just want you to be aware of that. Get the best information you can into that document in the fewest sentences or whatever the best way to say that would be. And then let's see, here's the checklist I mentioned earlier. This is again, you don't need to check all these off and submit it with your application. This is not required. This is just a resource document for you. So basically, did you do these things as you went through the application? And if you check the yes box on all of them or most of them, it probably means you did a pretty good job. Some of the things may not relate to you because not everyone's project is the same. But this is a document, just basically a resource for you guys. And then the HOA 501c3 document is basically HOAs are not permitted to apply as primary applicant groups for the funding. HOAs can absolutely participate, and the way they participate, it would be as a partnership group. So they would have to partner with a registered block watch or neighborhood association in order to apply. This document is required. The document itself is not required, but the items down there at the bottom where those check boxes are must be completed. And I'll zoom in on a little bit because I know the screen's probably small. But those documents down there at the bottom are required if you're partnering with an HOA. You have to submit those items with your grant application. If you're in an HOA neighborhood and you're doing a capital improvement project, you're required to partner with your HOA. And the reason is we've had groups apply in the past for like lighting, other items that that the HOA would govern essentially, and then the HOA turns around later and says take those items down. Well, in that instance, the city or the taxpayers really are losing that money because those items, the money's not coming back into the program for those items that are being taken down, thrown away, whatever. Maybe they're being returned to the city of Phoenix, but maybe they can't even be used again. So if you're in an HOA area and you're doing a capital improvement project or something that is not, like simple block watches, patrolling, that kind of thing, you are required to partner with that HOA, and this form must be completed. All right, and then this document I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the actual application guide. This is the most important document that you're going to use for applying for grant funds. This has every single piece of information that you need to know about eligibility criteria, prohibited items, any of that stuff that is going to be necessary for completing the application. Again, the program or the application process opened November 1st. It's due the first Thursday of December, which is Thursday, December 4th by 4 p.m. And just keep that in mind. You may see that 6 p.m. deadline, or you may see another number somewhere in the system. It wouldn't surprise me, but keep in mind that 4 p.m. date. So these are all the documents that you would find on our website that are relevant to the grant project itself. So I'm going to go back now to the portal. And by the way, we've kind of done this over the years where we essentially, instead of walking through this presentation, which tends to be pretty boring for people, and we've gotten some feedback. And so what people want to see is us actually click through the application. So I'm going to do that. It's not going to take very long. I'll just show you how to do everything. And then we'll go into the guide real quick and talk about some of the requirements of the guide because that's very important as well. But to begin your application, the first thing you're going to do, after you get logged in, you notice I'm logged in here. So whether you have to register a new profile or log in, you're going to do that step first. And our guide will help you do that. You're going to click current grants on the left-hand menu right there. And you'll notice that our staff test application 001 is already in here. So we've already tested the system before, November 1st happened to make sure it was working correctly. It was working correctly. So I'm going to show you how to start a new application, but then I'm also going to show you how to edit the current one I have, just in case, depending on what step you're at. But to start a new application, in this top, you'll hear me say the word table a lot, because I call these things here tables. But in this top table here, at the very bottom, you're going to see a plus symbol. If you hover your mouse over it, it says add record. So you're going to click that plus symbol to start a new application. I'm just going to cancel out of this just real quick. If you've already started an application and you have items here in the grid, so when you click current grants, if you have items here in the table, when you go to, you already have an application saved for the first time, you're not going to hit the plus again. You're going to select the application you want to edit by making it green. And you're going to click this icon here, which is the edit record. We call it the pencil icon, but it's really the edit record icon. So you, again, select green, the application you want to edit or work on, and hit this pencil icon, and that same window will pop up. But you'll notice the fields aren't blank because I've been working on it or you've been working on it. So that's how you create your application. Again, if you're starting brand new, you're going to hit the plus symbol, and then you're just going to start filling information out in this form. If you hit save, it will keep this window open and allow you to save your progress as you go. If you hit save and close, it's going to close this window and save your data here in this grid. And then you'll notice there's a cancel button. If you type something in by mistake, obviously you can just hit cancel or whatever, and it'll take you back to this window. But let's say you're going to hit plus. In this instance, I'm going to open the one I already have so I can show you the sample. But let's say you're going to start brand new with a fresh one. You hit plus. We'll just pretend I hit plus right there. And you're going to start filling your information out here. So project title, that's going to be the group, I say but really the group's opinion on the project title. The city doesn't give you the project title. You guys come up with that on your own. So a group called me today earlier on the phone and they were asking about what to put in right there. This is whatever project you're going to run. So if your project is 2026 PNP project, which stands for Phoenix Neighborhood Patrol, you can put that in there. You can put the name of your group in there. Some groups get a little more fancy with the title and they're our blight and street cleanup project and whatever else. Absolutely. You can put whatever in here you want. Some of these fields do have character limits, so just be aware. The system should tell you when you're at the end of the character limit. But for most things, no one really ever runs into that. I just want to let you know up front. But for our application, we just were testing the system. So we did 2026 test. The NSD notification number, the 4-digit number, very important. You can find that very easily a couple different places, but I'm going to show you how to find it through our website. You're on our website right here. Remember, I told you you can bookmark it up at the top. Let's say you already bookmarked it. In order to find your NSD number, you're going to scroll down to the bottom, and you'll notice this says NSD listing and signature forms. Let's click that link. It's going to take you to this page here. So you may notice from past years that the city websites look a little bit different than they used to. The city updated their websites not too long ago. So some of the links go maybe to different places than you're used to, but you can always come back and find the information on the left-hand menu. So again, let's say we scroll down to the bottom, we click NSD and listing forms, and you're going to click here, link to neighborhood groups. Click the neighborhood link. And what I would do first, there are a couple different options, but what I would do first is I would click this blue button here. If you think your neighborhood is already registered with NSD, you want to click that blue button and you want to find them here. So what I recommend is you just do alphabetical list. So I'm going to use Shaughnessy as an example here because I know he's in here and he won't be embarrassed if I pull this up. So I'm going to use Shaughnessy as an example. Shaughnessy is with Bernard Black. So in this list, you're just going to click alphabetical B, and you're going to go down here and you're going to find your group. Okay, so this is Shaughnessy's group right here. And by the way, this website is a public-facing website that anybody can go on this website. You know, you don't need to be a city employee to go on this website. Just FYI, you can go find this information the same way I did. So this 4-digit number that's in parentheses here, that's your NSD listing number. So back on our webpage, you may remember it said NSD notification number. It's going to be that 4-digit number that's in parentheses right there. That's what you're going to paste into here. And, you know, our sample number is a fake number that we came up with. So the NSD, I think the highest number they've given out is somewhere around 3,500 right now. So they shouldn't get to this number anytime close. But your 4-digit number is that number in parentheses. If you are not registered with NSD, let's say you don't find the name of your organization on here, and there are various ways you can search, by the way. You can search by your address. You can search by council district. To me, alphabetical list is the easiest way to find it, but there are various ways you can find it. If you notice that it's not on the alphabetical list and you're certain it's listed, you can try citywide organizations down here, because some of these citywide organizations, it looks like there's 24 listed right now that are active. Some of those folks are not listed in the alphabetical list. So just FYI. You can go down to citywide organization if you don't see it here. If you know that your group, let me just refine their group again. If you know that your group should be listed on the website and you don't see it on here, what that means is NSD deactivated it on the back end. Now, it's not as big of a deal as it sounds when I say that, but you want to contact NSD immediately to reactivate that listing. And their phone number can be found on this link page right here. So neighborhood link, their phone number is right there. And you want to call them as soon as possible to get your neighborhood pasted back on that page, or we'll just say activated, because eligibility criteria for the program, for the grant program, says your group has to be listed on this website in order to apply. And when we go to the application guide, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But you want to make sure you can see the name of your group on this website. If you are a brand new group and registering for the first time, that's not a problem. When I get to the application, I'll talk about the differences in the eligibility criteria, but I'll just say right now, you can submit your form to NSD, which actually I haven't even clicked on yet, but I'll show you. You can submit your listing form to NSD up to the deadline of the grant submission, the application submission. So you can submit your form to NSD up until December 4th. So keep that in mind. Let's see here. Let's go back real quick to this page here. So if you don't have a 4-digit number, your group is brand new. Instead of clicking here, let's say you already searched and you already clicked here, you searched, you didn't find your group. If your group is not there, you're going to come down here and you're going to click this, download the listing application, and you're going to fill this document out. So just follow all the directions on this document. If you have questions about this stuff here, the NSD stuff, make sure you contact Neighborhood Services directly. Don't contact us here in police, because we don't handle this list. The reason that we use the list for the grant program is it's the only list in the city of Phoenix where the groups are listing, saying they're active for neighborhood participation. So that's why we use the list. The police department used to have its own list, and then the city decided it didn't make sense to have two competing lists, so they put them all on one. If you're going to list as a block watch, there is a requirement that an officer come out to one of your meetings. And so what will happen when you submit your form back to NSD, and we'll talk about that here in a second, when you submit your form back to NSD, NSD will contact the police department, probably the CAO in your neighborhood, and then they will connect you guys, and you will invite them out to a meeting so they can see that you are a block watch group. If you register as one of these other ones here, Neighborhood Association, Business Alliance, or HOA, it's not required that an officer come to your meeting. And then keep in mind, if you register as an HOA on this form, you technically are not allowed to apply as a primary applicant group on our grant application. So keep that in mind. If your intention is to be a primary applicant for group or application grant fund purposes, make sure you list as one of these first three. So keep that in mind. And then this form, I think it's 3 pages. Yeah. So you just have to fill this form out to get listed. So this is the requirements of neighborhood services. And again, not our staff. This is not our requirement. This is their requirement, but we come here to verify that you're active with NSD in order to apply for the grant. So a couple different things there. And if you have, general questions about the criteria for the grant application, you certainly can contact our staff. But if you have questions about listing your neighborhood, you want to contact NSD staff here. All right, so that's where your 4-digit number would go. Primary applicant group name, that's whatever your group's name is as listed on this website. So for example, Bernard Black Neighborhood Association. So when you go to type that in on your grant, you're not just going to type Bernard Black right here. You're going to type Bernard Black Neighborhood Association. You want to put it in this field exactly as it's listed on this website. Form type. This trips a lot of people up, and I do apologize ahead of time because our staff doesn't have access to change this in the portal. And I know that sounds silly. The good thing is we're getting a new grants management system soon. It probably will be online in time for next year's grant application process, the 2027 grant process. My assumption is it'll be online well before that, and you may be doing your quarterly reports in the new system, but as far as we're concerned, you're doing your application in this system here, so that's why we're training you on this right now. But your form type, it's going to default, I believe, to up to 1,000. What that 1,000 really means is 3,000. The minimums on the grant are 3,000 and the maximums are 15,000. And when I say minimum, I don't mean you can't apply for $0 or $1. What I mean is if you don't meet the full criteria to go for 15,000, your maximum for the smaller grant application type is $3,000. You'll see that in the guide when I get to it later. But if you want to apply for up to 15, you're going to click here, up to 10,000. And I know that's confusing. Just keep it in mind in your head. Up to 10,000 means up to 15,000 in reality. And then this drop down, you're going to tell us what kind of group you are. So, how did you list with NSD? Did you list as a Blockwatch group or neighborhood organization, a business alliance? This PMP group, you may notice, is not a checkbox on their form. So if you list on their form and it's a neighborhood association or a Blockwatch, but really with us, you want to be labeled as a PMP group, you can click PMP group. That's perfectly fine. Are you partnering with another organization? So if you click yes, I'll show you what it looks like. If it's no, it's because it's going to default to no on the application. If you click no, you'll notice the section that was below that went away. But if I click yes, that section is going to pop up, and then you're going to have to fill this out here. The name of your co-applicant group, and the co-applicant can be a business, a nonprofit group, a city department, a school, a faith-based organization, or any other type of partner that you can do, that you can think of, a crime prevention type program with. Shaughnessy, for example, he does a youth program. So they partner with an organization that does youth sports. So that's perfectly fine. It essentially works like a nonprofit. You can put them in there. So you're going to click yes, you're going to put the name of the group, and then you're going to put the type of the group. In my example here, we made it easy. Obviously, we just said City of Phoenix Police and a city department. The fields that are grayed out with that red line through it, those are the ones that the application website will auto-fill for you later. So when you do your budget later, it's going to fill that in. If you find out if you're approved later, it's going to fill that in, that kind of stuff. The reason why this is grayed out is because I'm currently logged into my account. So it's just pulling my information from here. You'll notice logged in as and putting it here. So that's how those fields with the circle with a line through it work. So you can't type into those fields. They're auto-filled later for you. So let's say, for example, I'm going to come back. I'm not going to save this just so you guys know, but let's say you're not partnering. You'll just leave that as no, and then you'll scroll down to the next field where you can actually type something in. So you're the person beginning the application. You're considered technically the contact person for now. It can be changed later. But if you start the application, if you create it, save it, start it under your account, no one else can log in later and edit, make changes. Only you, the person who began the application, can make changes in your account. Later on, if we find out that you're awarded and you're going to be a signer, every signer will have access to the application, but only the contact person has it up front. just FYI. So you're going to put all your information in here. You're going to put your email address. Very important that you put the email address that you signed up on the website with, because if you didn't sign up on the website with the email address, the system is going to give you an error saying we don't have you listed as that email address. If someone else has used the email address that you type in here and registered on our site with it before, it's going to give you another error. You can only list with an email address one time on our website. So if Jane Doe registered on our website 5 years ago with janedoe@gmail.com, and then John Doe comes, 5 years later to register janedoe@gmail.com, it's not going to let him, because that email address is already associated with that person who first signed up. So you want to make sure you use the email address that is tied to your login profile. It is possible to be a contact person and not a signer. So if you're the person filling the grant out and you don't want to be a signer, you just click no right there, and then you begin filling the information out. If you are going to be signer one, all you have to do is click yes, and then you don't have to fill the information out again. So again, if you're not going to be a signer, you click no and fill it out. If you are going to be a signer, what it does is it just assumes that this person up here, primary applicant, is going to be signer one. Signer two, you come down here and put your second signer's information in all the way down. Again, any field that has like a white space, you can type into. You're going to tell us what group they're representing, because if they're representing your partner group, let's say you're partnering again with a youth program, you're going to change that to co-applicant, and you're going to have your co-applicant's information in here. They will get an email when you save this saying, hey, you've been listed on application XYZ. Do you want to be a signer or not? Please contact our staff. So you can let your people know who you're listing as signers, that they will get a contact from our system as well, just FYI. In the instance of a partnership group where a primary applicant group is the main applicant on the application and the partner is the co-applicant, that's why this drop down exists, is because every organization listed, so if there are 2 organizations listed, they each have to have at least 1 signer on the application. You can have a total of 3. That's the maximum number of signers on your application. But again, if you're partnering with a group, the groups each must have at least 1 signer. So the primary applicant would be the Blockwatch group in this example, and the co-applicant group would be, in Shaughnessy's example, it would be the organization that's doing youth sports. So, you would have primary applicant here, and then you're part of ABC Blockwatch. And then when you put your co-signer's information in, you would put co-applicant, and they're a member of ABC Sports Organization, or whatever the case may be. Same thing with the third signer. So let's see. I'm going to hit cancel real quick because it looks like it did something to the form there. I'll reopen this. I don't know why this thing's being difficult today, but it wants to be for some reason. Okay, if you don't have a signer 3, you'll notice it says if applicable. So if you don't have a signer 3, you can leave all that blank. The only fields that need to be completed are the ones with an asterisk, just so you know. Geographic boundaries. So you're going to give us the geographic boundaries that you listed with NSD on your application. If you don't remember, you can come to this page and it'll tell you right here what your boundaries are. Those are the boundaries you want to enter in to your application here. If your boundaries have changed, you can type in whatever your new boundaries are, and then later on, make sure you contact NSD to update your page here. And then you're going to tell us what council district you're in, you're going to tell us what police precinct, and then you're going to tell us the approximate number of households that your registered Blockwatch or neighbor association serves. You don't have to be 100% accurate on that. We're not going to go, to I don't even know where that information would be, maybe the county recorder's office or something. We're not going to go to that website and double check. If you have 300 homes in your square mile or your Blockwatch group, and it turns out you have 320, we're not going to penalize you for that. We just want to know an approximate number of, or how big your neighborhood is, or how big the project is going to serve. And then down here, project impact. These are all things related to Blockwatch and or crime prevention. You don't have to check yes to all of these, but you do have to at least check yes to one of them. If you don't check yes on at least one of these, you'll get an error or an email later saying your application can't be submitted. So just keep in mind. You know, if for example, on my example here, I only checked one of the six. If your project is really only going to affect one of the six, you're not going to be penalized for only doing one. You know, someone's not going to say, well, hey, they're not doing six. That's not the case. They want you to be honest about what you think your project that you're going to do is going to affect in that section right there. And then down below that is where you're going to get into your narratives. So the application narratives and descriptions, your the history of your organization can go in there. Remember, be succinct on this kind of stuff. You don't need to write a dissertation, but I would recommend you know, we see some groups that'll write one sentence. I would recommend you don't do it that way, because then the people who are scoring the application may think that you're not putting the work in, you know, that is required. But be succinct on these sections. They do all have character limits, but some of them, the character limits are bigger than the other ones. This summary of grant project, I know the character limit is fairly limited as compared to organizational history and grant history, because this section goes to city council with the application scores, and that's how they get the summary of what your project is. So this section is somewhat limited, but still, you know, plenty of room to type. It's just more limited than the other sections are. And then grant history is just if you've been awarded a grant in the past, or if you've applied and not been awarded a grant, you can put all that history in there. You know, we've been awarded funds the last 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. And then down here, you're going to list what years you were funded previously and what amounts you were funded previously. Right here, primary applicant volunteer contribution. Remember earlier we talked about the volunteerism or the community involvement section being 20% of your score. This section is very important, and I'm going to show you, we talked briefly about one thing. I'm going to show you another thing in the application guide. So, and we'll get to this in a second, but just for now, I'm going to pull it up. So the general labor rate for the 2026 grant year for calculations on the application is $34.79 per hour. What that means is when you come over here to your application and you're doing a volunteer contribution, what the oversight committee wants to see here is a couple different things. So if you have, say you have 20 people, 20 people volunteering with your organization for all things, cleanups, block watch meetings, coffee with a cop, submitting the grant application, driving to pick things up, whatever you want to put in there, all the time you donate to the neighborhood and or the project, you want to do this calculation basically. And then, you know, put in here what your amount is. So the number of volunteers, or sorry, I skipped one thing. The number of volunteers times the number of hours they have donated times that number. And that'll be your volunteer contribution. As I mentioned earlier, you can also put in here in-kind donations, which would be like something you get from Walmart. You know, if they give you a gift card to use at Walmart for meetings or whatever, you absolutely can put that in here. And you also can put matching in here. So your neighborhood, you're going to request 15,000. Your neighborhood is going to donate. You know, you're going to match funds with 15,000 to make the entire project worth 30,000. So these are the different things you're going to do in this section. You can also write a little bit. You don't just have to do a pure calculation here, by the way. You can write a little bit of narrative if you want about what volunteerism your group has done. You can say cleanups, you know, painting over graffiti, you know, et cetera, whatever you want to write. And then you can do your calculation down here. Did I spell that incorrectly? And then you can do your calculation down here, and then your matching and your in-kind donations. If you don't have any of that and you only have the volunteerism, that's perfectly fine. I just would say put a little bit of narrative in here about what your volunteers do before you do the calculation. So again, that's really what the oversight committee wants to see in that section. The primary applicant volunteer contribution, you'll notice there's an asterisk there. That section is required. Regardless if you're applying on your own or you're applying with a partner, you have to put something in there. And like I said, I would put something in there that shows that you've been doing a lot of volunteerism over the last year. The next section, co-applicant volunteer contribution. If you are partnering with an organization as a partner, you must put something in this field. If you're not partnering with anyone and you're just applying on your own as the primary applicant group, and by your own, I don't mean like a person, I mean a group. But if your group is just applying as ABC Block Watch and not partnering with ABC Church or ABC Business, you don't need to do this section down here. You only need to do this one. But if you're partnering, you need to do this one too. So you would do the narrative for your primary applicant group up here, and you would do the narrative for your co-applicant group down here. Now we get some confusion sometimes where people think this is signer 1 and this is signer 2. That's not what it is. Make sure you don't do it that way. This up here, primary applicant group, is where you do all the narrative for all the signers on your grant, unless it's a co-applicant signer, and then you do that down here. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, let me know, because we see that often. And then down here, let me skip to the bottom just real quick, because this is the shortest part of the presentation, but the last 4 questions have to do with traffic mitigation. If you are not requesting funds for like a roundabout or speed humps or, you know, any of those things that are the typical things, you don't need to fill this section out. If you are requesting funds for those items, you do have to complete this section. And you also have to prove that you know, by uploading your study and whatnot, that you've done, this stuff is all in the application guide that we'll get to, but you do have to prove, you know, that you've been working on this as part of your project. But again, if you're not doing traffic mitigation, you can leave these 4 questions blank. So no, 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 and this blank. You can, if you want, you could put like NA in here, or you could spell it out, not applicable, whatever you want. I say you could just leave it blank. You know, don't worry about it. Okay. Now back to this section here. This is very important, budget narratives and information. So budget narratives and information is where you're going to write your narrative for the budget that you submit. This is how the Oversight Committee and City Council know the reason for what you're requesting. This is only my recommendation that I'm going to say, but you can do it however you want. What I recommend to groups to do is when you get to this section on the application, let's just say, you know, you're not going to do traffic mitigation. So you can skip that. And this is the last section of the narrative. You get here, what I would say, hit save and close. So I'll just hit cancel for now to show you exactly what I'm talking about, but hit save and close. You'll come back to this page. It'll look like this, where you have your 26th grant up here. And then I recommend you start entering your budget information first. And I'll get into this in more detail, what I'm talking about, but enter your budget information down here first, and then go back to your budget narrative after you've entered your budget and start doing your budget narrative. It's very difficult to write your budget narrative before you actually fill your budget out. So let's say you put, you know, office supplies in your budget. Let's say you put shirts. Let's say you have, what else do we want to use? Promo items. So the way our staff recommends you do it is you say the item that you put in the budget. Like if you can see behind here in gray, you notice I put like office supplies, and then in parentheses, I put that clothing, block watch sign. So office supplies, this is how we recommend you do it. And this is how the Oversight Committee kind of wants to see it, is you do office supplies, and then you write your sentence or couple sentences about what you're buying and how you're justifying what you're buying. So let's say you're doing pencils, pens, ink cartridges, etc. And then you write why you need those. And then you come down here for t-shirts or shirts. You can even do clothing. You don't have to do shirts. I just was trying to think of things. You do clothing, and then you can say t-shirts, polo shirts, etc., whatever you're going to buy, and then you do your narrative for what the reasons why you need those items. And then promo items, you're doing frisbees, coffee mugs, refrigerator magnets, whatever you're doing that would be a promo item. And then I always recommend for the items like this, you can't do it in equipment and supplies, and I'll show you what I mean later. But you can do this in the consumables category. You can use the word etc., which will cover you later in case you want to buy something that is a promo item, but you didn't specifically list it. So again, then you would put your narrative for that item. So what some groups do is they'll just go in here overall and write a whole paragraph in as narrative. But I think for the Oversight Committee and City Council, it's easier if you address each item in the section and write a note or two about each item. It's more clear for them what you're asking for, I think groups tend to get a higher score when they do it that way. So just FYI. You're going to do that for whatever category. I'm just going to hit cancel real quick and go back. For whatever category you enter items for, there are 4 categories: consumables, equipment and supplies, operational expenses, and personnel. Whichever items you have, whichever categories you have items under, as you list them, you're going to come here, like I said, and go to that budget narrative, and you're going to write it under the correct budget narrative. So consumables, equipment and supplies, operational expenses, and personnel. These sections you can leave blank if you don't have items in those sections. So let's say you didn't request anything in personnel, and the best personnel example is, you need a DJ or a face painter or something like that for your GAIN event. I know groups have different ideas, and so we have some groups that pay teachers or CPR instructors or whatever the case may be. Perfectly fine. To list those positions out. You don't need to put the person's name in there. We just need to know what the position is going to do. But if you don't have this section in your budget, say you don't have anyone coming to your GAIN event, you're not paying anyone in personnel, you can just put NA. And then in these ones, you'll have answers based on how you want to write the grant, whether you want to write a paragraph or you want to address each item individually. I can tell you this. So for next year, when the new grants management system is built, when you enter your budget in down here, it's going to ask you to do the narrative for each item as you write the grant. So I can warn you about that. That's kind of why I'm saying you may want to, get in the habit of doing that with your grant. There is something in the application guide that I believe says they recommend for you to do it that way. When I open the application guide, I'll confirm that for sure. I don't think it says required, but it may be. And if it is, then you definitely want to do your budget that way. But when we get to that section, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But anyways, so to start your budget, you have your row highlighted green here. You have your first row highlighted green. You're going to come down here. You can see that this is my sample application. Obviously, I've already entered some in. To enter a new item, click the plus symbol. Oh, sorry, I skipped a step. Let me say this first. Before you want to hit the plus to enter an item, you want to select what category the items are going into, whether they're going into consumables, equipment and supplies, operational expenses, or personnel. So you want to click what category it's going to first. Let's say we're going to do consumables. You're going to click the plus symbol right there. Consumables is automatically going to pop up in that first column. And in the items requested, you're going to put what items you want in here. I will show you on the application guide the sample of the items that will fit in each category. So, you're not necessarily pulling this out of thin air. You'll use our guide as an example, but I'll show you where those items are. But I'm just going to duplicate the office supplies one, as the best example. What I recommend you do, if you do, because we have some groups that'll do this, they'll do paper here, then they'll enter a new line item for ink, then they'll enter a new line item for paper or pens or whatever. I recommend you just put office supplies in one line, and in parentheses you say what you want to buy, and then at the end put etc., because etc. covers you in case you want to go outside those specific items. I hope that makes sense. Again, in equipment and supplies you cannot do that, but in operational expenses and consumables you can for certain items. Then you're going to put your vendor in here. I would recommend you never use TBD. Even if you, and the reason I say that is because it doesn't give the oversight committee, scoring committee, any information about what you're doing. Even if you don't end up using that vendor that you put in this section, like let's say I put Staples here, but I go buy my office supplies from Amazon later on, that's perfectly fine. You're not going to get in trouble at all for doing that. They just want to make sure that you've put some thought into what your item is right here. So I would recommend you don't ever say to be determined in that section. Put a vendor you think you can buy those items from here. And again, if you don't use them, if you don't end up using that vendor, that's perfectly fine. Then you're going to do your cost per item. In this section, cost per item is very interesting because if you're bulking things together, all those items are going to be different costs. But I'm going to warn you of one thing. Let's say you want to spend a total of $1,000 on office supplies. What some groups will do is this. They will put 1,001. the oversight, excuse me, the oversight committee will say, well, I'm pretty sure they're not spending, they're not buying one office supply item for $1,000, but because they told me that, I'm not sure. So I'm going to go to their narrative and read in the narrative to see if they addressed what they're really doing. So if you put a 1 in either one of these columns, and office supplies is a very good example here because, like I said, you may end up buying 50 different things at various prices. But if you put a 1 in either one of these columns, and we'll just use the example that I have here, you want to spend $1,000 overall in office supplies and you put a quantity of 1. When you save that, I'm just going to hit cancel for now to show you what I mean. When you save that, I would recommend you come to your narrative, your consumables narrative, and you say office supplies. You know, our intention is not to buy one item for $1,000. And then you explain what you really want to do. You know, our intention is to buy many items at many different prices, et cetera, to get it to make sense to the oversight committee so they don't think you're just buying one item. And the reason why I recommend that is because with the items, like I said, that you're bundling together, it's much easier to just put a 1 in there, you know, one quantity at the price you want for the whole line item, and then just explain it in the narrative than it is to enter a bunch of different line items in, you know, ink, paper, pens, and then you put exactly what you want to spend on those things. It's easier to do it the other way where you just bulk it together and you just address it in the narrative. So FYI. So again, plus symbol, type your item in, type the vendor, cost per item, quantity, and hit this save button right here. It looks like the old floppy disk logo. What I will say you made a mistake on this Blockwatch signs here. So we did $400 for Blockwatch sign, $40 per item, 10 quantity. Let's say you made a mistake. You do not want to edit and change the calculation. You don't want to edit these two fields. You can edit these two, the signs or the vendor. But if you want to edit the math calculation, instead of hitting the edit button, what you want to do is you really want to delete the whole line. So to delete the line, you're going to click it green and you're going to hit the trash can icon. And it's going to ask you if you're sure. So for now, I'm just going to hit the delete trash can and we're going to add it again. So we'll go plus, we're going to do Blockwatch signs, and we're going to do Phoenix Blockwatch Advisory Board because that's where all the Blockwatch signs are going to come from. And you're going to buy they're $40 a piece and you're going to buy 12 instead of 10. Let's say that was our math mistake originally. And we're going to hit save. And now it will update the math for you on the back end that it previously would not have updated because you did the edit instead of the delete and re-enter. So just keep that in mind. The system may not calculate the math correctly if you edit these two fields. We recommend you delete them and re-enter them completely. So you'll notice here that it did calculate 480. Sometimes if you edit these, it doesn't recalculate. So just FYI. And then, you know, you're going to come in here and you're going to do all your items. So you're going to do consumables, equipment and supplies, operational expenses, personnel. Some of the categories you may not have anything that you're requesting in those categories. And if you aren't requesting anything in those categories, you just leave them blank. You don't need to come in here and put NA in this section. You would just leave this whole column, you know, this whole tab blank if you don't have anything in those sections. And then documents, you're going to upload all your required documents. And when I go to the application guide, I'll show you what I'm talking about, but you're going to upload all your required documents. The way that you're going to do that is you're going to click this green Add Files button. I'm just going to upload a sample document that we've already looked at, but let's say here's your document, 501c3 checklist. You're going to click open. If you have a MacBook computer, it'll look a little bit different, but it's the same function. So you hit add files, select from your database, you know, whether it's on your hard drive or a jump drive or whatever it is, you're going to save it there. And then you'll notice this little white box here, description popped up. You're going to put your description in. So for now, I'm just going to copy this. But really, you know, in this section, you shouldn't just be copying the file name. You should be telling the oversight committee So how about this? We'll type in description of upload. So really in this text box, you should be describing what you're uploading here. So, you know, like say agenda 1-3-25. And then you're going to hit the blue upload button. You'll notice that that went in right there. And you're going to do that for all your uploads. Once it uploads correctly, you're going to hit the red remove button, and it doesn't mean it removes it from down here. It just removes it from up here so you can do your next one. One thing I will say, if you upload something on accident, you don't have the ability on your side of the application to delete it. You want to contact our staff and ask our staff to delete it for you because we can do it for you. All right. And then the reports tab, I'm not going to talk about right now because we're having some errors on the reports tab. If you get to the point where you've submitted your application or it's in draft and you want an Excel version of it first from us to look at, let us know and we can email that to you, because for now the reports tab is not working. So I don't want to bother you with that. But if you want a copy that looks different than this website looks, let us know and we'll pull it for you. Only thing you're going to do now, once you're done with everything, is you're going to submit the application. So let's say you've entered all your budget line items in, you entered your documents, you went back in here and you entered all your budget narrative in here down at the bottom based on what you typed into your budget. You're ready to submit. You'll hit that button right there, that submit application tab, and then you'll hit the blue submit application button here. It will ask you to confirm. So if you hit it on accident, you can hit cancel, obviously. And the one thing I didn't mention is you want to make sure that it's green on this row here before you hit that button. So you don't want to go back and submit that grant. You want to submit that grant, in other words. So we'll do submit. We'll hit continue. You'll notice that refresh there real quick, and it's in submitted status. The one thing I always make people aware of, if you see it in submitted status, don't assume that it's submitted correctly. You want to refresh this page to make sure it stays in submitted status. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can either hit this icon right here, reload grid, or you can click back on current grants. So let's hit this reload grid. You'll notice that little thing spun and it stayed submitted. So that means that I submitted it correctly. I'm not missing any documentation. Well, I shouldn't say documentation. That's a different story. But you're not missing any of the asterisk fields. You have not exceeded $15,000 in your budget. Any of the things that the system is automatically checking for. Our staff will later go in and do a review and send it back to you if you're missing a document or something like that. We give you a chance to fix it. So you'll see an email from us and it'll say, urgent, please fix these things, and we'll give you a resubmission date to have it back to us by. So that is the actual application process in the portal. And again, this document, which is online, will take you step by step through everything I just did. And again, my intention is to post this presentation that we're doing right now on the police YouTube page. So it's easier. You can, hear my voice talking about it, leading you through. But this document, if you ever need to go in because something in this workshop right now you forgot, you can go into that document and it will show you step by step how to submit your grant application. So again, that's the portal. So we're submitted. So real quick, or maybe not real quick, but I guess maybe it'll take a little bit longer. I'm going to talk about the actual application guide and point out some things that are very important. And then we'll go from there. And if we have any question and answer, we can do that after that. So let's go to the application guide real quick. I'm just going to close all these other pages down here. Let's go to the application guide and let's talk about some of the items in the application guide. So second page, table of contents, you can click, these links are clickable. You can click on these links to take you directly to that page. So just FYI, table of contents is a live document to take you down to whatever section you need to read about. So that's first. This page 3 is kind of just like a welcome page. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about is mentioned on this page, the due date, links to our website, that kind of thing. Make sure you anytime you see things bolded or highlighted or underlined, just make sure you review that stuff, because this is talking about incomplete grant applications being disqualified and late submissions not being accepted. So remember, 4 p.m. Arizona time on Thursday, December 4th is the last time you can submit the application online. The system will not accept a submission after that time. It talks about the eligibility criteria here. So that's the eligibility criteria through Neighborhood Link to, get your group registered with NSD to be able to apply for the grant funds. So very important there. And there is a section down below in this guide that talks about eligibility. And so I'm going to wait till we get there to talk about that, the Neighborhood Link specifically. But that's the section right there. There's a link to their page. That's a section where it talks about what you need to do in order to apply for the grant. Let's see here. Here's another link to the PowerPoint presentation that I showed. You can click on any of these links and it will take you right there. It may take you to a weird page, like for some reason it took us to step 3, but then you can just scroll back up to step 1 or go down to whatever step you need to go to. Let's see here. Some application requirements and restrictions. This section just talks about the HOAs, the HOA checklist, being listed with Neighborhood Link. If you're an HOA, you can be listed with them, but you can't apply as a primary applicant. We've already talked about that. Multiple applications. Your primary applicant group can submit 2 applications in the following way. You can submit 1 application where only the primary applicant group is listed on it, so ABC Blockwatch. Then you can submit a second application where ABC Blockwatch is partnering with another group. So let's say 1 application you're submitting ABC Blockwatch, another application you're applying with ABC School, and that's your partner. If you wanted to do an application where you're partnering with ABC School and then ABC Sports Program, you can do that as well. You can do 1 application with each group. There is a requirement for co-applicants or partnership groups. They can only apply or be listed with an applicant 1 time. Now, the one like exception of that rule essentially is if that co-applicant group is citywide, like for example, if the business or business alliance or school or whatever is in your neighborhood, that group can only apply once. But if you're applying with like Silent Witness or some group that's citywide, and let's say you want to partner with that group and then a group on the complete other side of the city wants to partner with that group as well, that's totally fine. You wouldn't even realize that that group is partnering with that co-applicant. So this is just saying, in your neighborhood, those type of co-applicant groups, a business, a nonprofit, school, those groups can only be listed on 1 application. So just FYI. This is the section where I want to talk about the eligibility right here. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. So applicants can request between $1,000 and $3,000 if you must be registered with the City of Phoenix Neighborhood Services Department by the grant application submission deadline. So again, I said earlier, you can list with NSD up until Thursday, December 4th in order to apply for up to $3,000 of Blockwatch money. You also have to submit copies of at least 2 primary applicant group meeting agendas or minutes or flyers. So it's not this and this and this and this. It's one of these things. So you have to have held at least 2 meetings in your neighborhood in separate months. And the document, this says agenda right here, but the document must show that you discussed at least 1 crime prevention topic. So again, 2 different months meeting documentation, and it can be any of those types of meeting documentation. And you must include the crime prevention topic that was discussed, and the number of attendees must be listed on that documentation as well. So one thing I want to say with that, the Oversight Committee and City Council do not want PII. PII is personal identifying information. They do not want you to submit PII. So do not submit your sign-in sheets at your meeting. What they want you to submit is an agenda, meeting minutes, a flyer, and then they want to see the topics that you discussed to make sure that they're crime prevention related. And they want to see you write or type on the form somewhere how many people attended. They don't want you to submit a roll call or a list of people with phone numbers and email addresses on there. They don't want that. So just FYI. Okay. The maximum for the grant application is $15,000. So how do you apply for between $3,001 and $15,000? Okay, your organization must have been in existence and registered with the Neighborhood Link program, which we already mentioned up here, but they must have been in existence and registered for at least 6 months prior to the application submission deadline. So 6 months prior to the deadline would be June 4th. So you had to at least been listed with NSD by June 4th of this year, 2025, to meet the criteria for applying for more than $3,000. The one thing that I will mention, we talked briefly about the 2 documents in the previous one. Those documents must be from the 2025 calendar year. So you can include anything from January to December 4th for meetings. You can't include anything that happened in 2024. It's not the city fiscal year, it's the calendar year of 2025. And then the other part of this, the between $3,001 and $15,000, instead of 2 copies of meeting agendas or minutes or flyers, you need 4. So the requirement is doubled. Again, same rules apply here. Number of individuals' attendance and the crime prevention topic must be included on the documentation. So again, between 1 and 3,000, you can apply up to the deadline, and you have 2 documents. For between 3,001 and 15,000, you must be registered for at least 6 months prior, and 4 documents, 4 pieces of meeting documentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to let me know. Like I said, I think this group that's in the workshop today knows these rules for the most part, but let me know. We already talked about the HOA checklist briefly. This had some rules for HOAs and 501c3s. The HOAs can only be listed as co-applicants on the grant. Geographic boundaries, we talked about that on the application when we went through it. Grant dollar limitations. So the 15,000 is the top cap. We told you that. And then this is very important here. So this says round estimates to the nearest whole dollar amount, and remember to account for sales tax, any kind of setup fees, shipping or freight, and permit fees. Don't list those items as a separate line. So let's say you were going to do a printer, and I think a printer is, I believe printers are capped at $500 or something, but when we get down to it, below, I'll show you. But let's say you're going to buy a printer and your printer is $250 at the store or online. Make sure you include fees, shipping, sales tax on everything for that item. So if your printer is going to be $250, let's say it's really going to be like $297 or something like that to get it shipped to you. I would recommend you put $300 in that line item. That covers all this stuff. All right. Okay, and this is the item I was talking about earlier when in your budget narrative, you're going to address each item. So this is technically is not a requirement to do it that way. I was unsure at the beginning if it was a requirement or not. This just says remember to address each line item in your budget, but I recommend you do it that way to achieve a higher score. Okay, community utilities information. So a maximum of $3,000 can be allocated towards electric bills for dusk to dawn lighting. You can't spend more than $3,000 on dusk to dawn lighting. There are some other items that are requested or required here. For the most part, these things don't ever come into play, but this does. The $3,000 is the max you can request towards electric bills for lighting. There are a couple rules with that. If you're doing a brand new contract for lighting, it has to be energy efficient. You can't get those old APS or SRP, lights that you see around the city that are vapor sodium. They have to be either LED or solar or some type of energy efficient lighting. But if you are currently grandfathered into an old project with SRP or APS, you can continue to pay the $3,000 for those conventional lights. Outside of that, you would be looking at something else like a solar light or something like that that's not connected to the APS or SRP grid, and in that case, you can, allocate a maximum of $3,000 to that lighting. I hope that makes sense. So this is one thing that was added in 2025, the community garden projects. You can request a maximum of $3,000 towards your utility water bill, but it has to be for a community garden project only. All right, the next section, grant evaluation. The minimum score you can achieve to receive grant funding is 5.25 out of 10. So you have to get a 5.25 or higher on your application to receive awarded funding. There is an appeal process if you find out that your group is not recommended for funding later on. You should receive contact from our staff for the first, initial notification in March or April, telling you, whether you are recommended for funding or not. If you get an email, or excuse me, if you get a letter that says you are not recommended for funding, you'll get also a notice about the appeal process where you can come in person and discuss with the oversight committee why not, and you can do a presentation to request an appeal to receive funding. If you are going to be awarded funding, likely you won't receive a contact in March or April. Typically, it's only for the groups who are going to get the appeal process. But if you have questions in March or April and you haven't heard anything, you can certainly contact us and say, hey, was I recommended for funding or not? And we will let you know. Scoring criteria, we already went through that document on the other page, but that's also listed here in the guide. We just want to make you aware of that. So there's a couple different places you can find that information. That is how the oversight committee is scoring you. Okay, responsible party information. We talked briefly about this. This is about the signers. A minimum of 2 is required. A maximum of 3 is allowed. And if groups are partnering, at least 1 signer needs to be from each organization. Let's see here. These are just some general rules for signers for the grant. So individuals who reside or work at the same physical address or who are related by marriage cannot sign on the same application. Members of the oversight committee cannot be signers for conflict of interest purposes. City employees cannot be signers in their capacity as a city employee. If they're just acting as a BlockWatch member for the neighborhood they live in, that's perfectly fine. They just can't use their city email address as part of the grant application. And then I mentioned this already, co-applicant groups are limited to 1 grant application per grant year. This one I did not mention yet. Individuals may not be listed as signers on more than 2 applications. So if you're signing on behalf of one for your neighborhood and behalf of like the police precinct grant in your neighborhood, that's perfectly fine, but that's a maximum of 2. You cannot be listed on more than 2. Volunteer hour contributions. We talked about that a little bit already, where you're going to use this $34.79 rate per hour. So this will tell you all about what qualifies for volunteer hour contributions for that section. We already went over that in pretty good detail, but that's on there. Preparation of the budget section. We already discussed that in detail as well when we were talking about the portal website. What I will bring up is 2 things. The restricted and or prohibitive item list. You can click on that from here and it will just take you further down into this document where those items are. And then also the budget categories and descriptions. So this is the section where it's going to tell you what a consumable is. These are the examples of items that would go in consumables. These are the examples of items that would go in equipment and supplies. One thing I will mention about equipment and supplies, and we talked about it briefly already, is if you do something in equipment and supplies and it's over $100, the city still technically owns that item for 2 years after the grant period ends. As a result of that policy, when you list items in equipment and supplies, you have to list them individually on each line. You can't say tables, chairs, computers, printers, etc., under one line item called office equipment or something like that. You have to break them out individually in equipment and supplies, what you're purchasing exactly. So if you're going to do a laptop for $750, that's on one line. A printer's on the next line. Chairs are on the next line. Tables are on the next line. If you're going to do 2 different price tables or 2 different price chairs, you don't have to create separate lines for those items. You can just say chairs, and we'll know when we look at your documentation later whether you follow the rules or not. So you don't need to worry about stuff like that, but you do need to be specific to the item for different things. Operational expenses. There's an example of operational expenses here. This is pretty important. Actually, both these things, let's just highlight these real quick. So if you're going to print newsletters with your grant funds, you cannot solicit new funds, whether it be advertisements or whatever the case may be in your newsletter if you're using grant funds to print the newsletter. The city views that as double dipping. You're paying for the newsletter with the grant funds and then reimbursing yourself on the back end with ads or whatever the case may be. You cannot do that. You also can't later on accept funds for a newsletter from a business, if it's being paid for with BlockWatch funds. Similarly, you cannot do that with admission fees to any events you put on. If the Blockwatch funds are being used to help you put that event on, you can't charge groups to set up at your event. So just FYI, you can do whatever you want if you're not using grant funds. Let me be very clear about that. The city does not govern all that stuff. The city just governs what you can and can't do with the grant funds. These are some of the examples of operational expenses, some of the examples of personnel here. Sometimes these things intertwine, the operational expenses and personnel. The general rule is if you're writing a check directly to, well, I keep on saying writing checks, but depending on what our payment system is for next year, if you're paying people directly, personnel would be where you would list it. If you're paying a business for a service, I would recommend you put it in operational expenses. If our staff looks at it later and thinks it belongs in the other category, we'll tell you that you should move it or we will move it for you. This is very important here. So administration of the grant itself, including payment to an accountant or individual to complete the quarterly reports or pay Blockwatch members, is strictly prohibited. So you can't pay someone to do your quarterly reports for you. You're doing it on a volunteer basis. The other part of that, if you have someone in the neighborhood who's like a handyman or someone who's going to do services for you, the ones that we always hear about are like translation or building a website. You cannot pay that person directly to do those things if they live in your neighborhood. If they own a business and you're writing a check to the business or using the declining balance card to pay the business, you can do it that way. The example that I always use is if you have a webmaster in your neighborhood and they're building a website for you, you can't pay John Doe Webmaster, but you can pay LLC, Webmaster Incorporated LLC that John owns or whatever the case may be, for example. If you have questions about that, let me know. You can't, oh, the one part of that I didn't mention, if you are paying someone outside the neighborhood for those services though, someone who doesn't live in your Blockwatch footprint, that's acceptable. Even if they don't own a business, very clear. Lawful traffic mitigation devices. So this right here talks about the speed hump program, about lawful traffic mitigation, the requirements for the application supplement, which is those last 4 questions I showed you, if you are doing lawful traffic mitigation. So refer to that stuff. Now, this is where the prohibited and restricted items are for the grant under this section here on page 17. So this talks a little bit about city council, about political activity, that kind of stuff. You can't use grant funds to influence elections or anything like that. Pretty self-explanatory, but just FYI. Down here, where are we? Prohibited items list. These are all the items that are fully prohibited. So these items you cannot list on your grant in any manner, whether it be price or type or anything like that. So that's page 18 of that guide. All these items are off limits. The city will not approve any of those items under any circumstances with grant funds. The restricted items, they will approve. Restricted meaning it's either a price cap or a certain type of program is required to be requesting those items. So a couple examples are like cell phones. What it's restricted by is just the amount you can spend. You can spend up to $500 for the service of the phone. So, say your phone service is $100 a month, you can pay up to $500 of that $1,200. Or if it's $40 a month or $50 a month or whatever, you can pay up to $600. $600 for the service, $500 for the device. I said that backwards. So $600 for the service of the phone, $500 for the device itself, a total of $1,100 on one phone, and the max phones you can purchase per grant year is one phone. And that's for a cell phone for Blockwatch purposes, essentially. PMP mileage reimbursement, you can do that as well. That's capped at $1,500 per grant year. The rate that we use is the IRS mileage rate. And I believe right now it's 70 cents per mile. Typically, they update it in January. So, when you're doing your grant forecasting right now, the maximum that you can request is $1,500. So you don't need to do a breakout of saying like 70 cents per mile or whatever. But if that amount goes up or down in January, before you get these funds per se, then we would let you know, hey, when you get your grant, you're still awarded $1,500, but you can only pay at this amount per mile instead of this amount. But we email all that information out to you. Let's see here. So this is a chart of other restricted items that are restricted by cap. So you can purchase these items that are listed here, and this will tell you the capped amount per item, or some things in parentheses may tell you like per presentation, per item. Laptops are a little bit different. So you can buy up to 2 per grant year, but that 2 extends for 3 years as well. So if you buy 2 laptops this grant year, you can't purchase another laptop with grant funds until 2 more grant cycles expire. So if you could do 1 this year and 1 next year, or 2 this year and then not another one for 2 more years. So that you'll see that kind of stuff in the restricted section. And then as we go further down, this will tell you that certain items are restricted per category. So these items can only be purchased if you're doing a Blockwatch or PNP type program. These items can only be purchased if you're doing a youth program. And then other restricted items, which we kind of touched on already, the $1,500 for PNP. I'll mention this one here in a second because we didn't talk about that one. The laptops are mentioned here, the traffic mitigations mentioned here, and then this one, internet services, a maximum of $750 per year provided to a shared space for internet. That doesn't mean you're donating $750 to someone you buy internet from. That just means if you're using internet in a common area, you can spend up to $750. If you're using it in your house, you can spend a maximum of $500. Insurance requirements. So you can list liability insurance in your grant for your events or for transportation or any of that kind of stuff. Anything that you can relate to crime prevention for insurance requirements, you can put the premiums for liability insurance in your grant application. This just tells you that the city of Phoenix does not cover you as a grantee. So they want to make you aware of that. Attachments. We talked briefly about how you upload your attachments in the grants management system. You are limited to 5 voluntary attachments. So that's voluntary attachments outside your required attachments. So the required attachments would be whether you're an HOA and you're filling out the HOA checklist, your 4 pieces or 2 pieces of meeting documentation, your lighting map if you're doing a new lighting project. Any of those things would be required documents, and anything you upload outside of that would be voluntary documents. So if we notice you did like 10 voluntary documents, we're going to send the application back to you and say, hey, you need to combine those all and down into 5 documents. This is very important here. The maximum file size for each upload is 5 megabytes. So if you get an error when you're uploading, make sure that the document you're trying to upload is not more than 5 megabytes. And you want to test those documents as well. If you can reopen them on your end after you've uploaded them, that means that we can open them on our end as well. We also ask that you don't use these truncated characters in the name field of your document, because if you put an @ or a number sign or something like that, we won't be able to open it on our end. The funding. So we talked about this briefly. It's going to go to the Oversight Committee for scoring, and then it will go to the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee, and then to full City Council. The funds cannot be funded prior to July 1 of next year. So that's when the grant technically starts. It's the city fiscal year runs July 1, 26 through June 30 of 27. So you're doing some forecasting now for July 1 of 26, just FYI. But you should, like I said, receive contact from us well in advance of that. Let's see here. So a contract is required between yourself, the grantees, and the city of Phoenix. That's something that we have that the city law department has approved. We will contact you for the contract signing workshop later on if you find out that you're funded. And the contract signing workshops are required, just FYI. Banking requirements. So the city used to partner with, they still partner with Chase, but they used to partner with Chase for a checking account. Right now, for this current 2025 grant year, we're partnering with Chase for a declining balance card, which works like a credit card. We don't know yet what will be the process for next grant year. It may go back to checking accounts. They may stay as declining balance cards. It may be something where you can pick which one you want. We don't know yet, but obviously you will find out when you find out whether you're going to be funded or not. Just FYI. Reporting. There are 4 quarterly reports that are required for grantees. You need to do every 3 months a quarter report. We will explain all that to you in much more detail at the contract signing workshop. And you don't need to create your own quarter report form. They're already created on our website. You would just complete the form, upload the items, the receipts that you items that you purchased, and whether you have a bank account or a declining balance card, you would upload the statements, and that would cover you for the quarterly report. Our staff reviews all that documentation. The next section, conclusion, termination of the project. We mentioned that briefly already, that Exhibit D. You don't need to do that until the end of the fourth quarter, so we'll get into that in way more detail later on, but just be aware those items, the tangible items in equipment and supplies that you purchased, do belong to the city of Phoenix technically. So, and then the city just wants you to be aware of auditing as well. You can be audited for the equipment that you purchase and or the documentation, receipts, that kind of thing, but it would only be for a total of 3 years, the grant year and 2 additional years, so a total of 3. So the city's not going to come audit you 10 years later, in other words. So nothing to panic about there. And then here at the end of the document, there's just some supplemental information. So basically more links with the same information. We try to give it to you as many times as possible. But yeah, so that's the application guide. So that is the end of the presentation, but our staff is here to answer questions. Whatever you guys have, we will answer to the best of our ability. If you want to do a personalized one-on-one WebEx where you share your screen with us, we can set that up with you as well. But we don't do that today. We would set that up with you at different times.